Something out there has been observing us. And the initial reports are unsettling. To say the least, we stumbled upon this discovery completely by accident. During a routine system diagnostic test, researchers at MIT, utilizing a cutting-edge AI designed to detect subtle anomalies in complex data sets, inadvertently decoded the 3I Atlas signal. The AI, part of a larger project aimed at improving signal processing, was initially tasked with identifying patterns in seemingly random cosmic background radiation. Think of it like this. Imagine trying to find a single needle in a galaxy-sized haystack. The challenge was immense. But the AI possessed the processing power to analyze vast quantities of data in a fraction of the time it would take a human. The initial scans of the 3I Atlas data revealed nothing of interest. It appeared to be just another source of background noise, a faint hum in the cosmic symphony. However, the AI, programmed to identify even the most subtle deviations from randomness, began flagging certain sections of the signal as structurally significant. These anomalies were subtle, barely perceptible fluctuations in the signal's frequency and amplitude, but they were enough to pique the researchers' interest. Initially, the team suspected a software glitch. After all, the AI was still in its early stages of development, and false positives were to be expected. However, repeated tests confirmed that the anomalies were real. The signal was not random. It contained a hidden structure, a pattern that defied all known natural explanations. That's when things took a sharp turn. The team decided to focus the AI's processing power on decoding the anomalies, attempting to extract any meaningful information from the seemingly meaningless noise. What happened next changed everything. Within hours, the AI had not only identified a complex repeating pattern within the signal, but it had also cracked its code. It turns out that the 3I Atlas signal was not a natural phenomenon at all, but a series of carefully structured messages, meticulously crafted and transmitted across interstellar distances. But here's the truly terrifying part. These messages weren't intended for us. They weren't a greeting, a declaration of friendship, or even a warning. They were intelligence reports, detailed observations of Earth, compiled and transmitted to an unknown recipient. The content of these reports was chilling. The AI had translated what amounted to a detailed surveillance operation, encompassing virtually every aspect of human civilization. The first few packets of decoded data contained comprehensive maps of our planet's infrastructure, communication networks, power grids, military installations, and even the locations of hidden facilities that even our own intelligence agencies weren't fully aware of. It mapped our satellites with unnerving precision, tracking their orbits and capabilities. It knew the location of every major radio transmitter on Earth, down to the individual frequency. This was not a casual observation. This was a systematic and deliberate effort to catalog our technological capabilities. But the reports went far beyond simply mapping our infrastructure. They contained detailed analyses of human behavior, tracking population movements, economic activity, and even social trends. Imagine someone watching our planet like a giant ant farm, recording every action, every interaction, every pattern of behavior. That's what these reports felt like. One particularly disturbing section of the decoded data contained detailed assessments of our military capabilities. It identified nuclear weapons storage facilities, missile defense systems, naval bases, and command centers, all classified by threat level. It even pinpointed vulnerabilities in our infrastructure, such as choke points in the internet and weaknesses in our power grids. According to one analyst who was part of the decoding effort, they found our soft spots, the places where a targeted attack could cause maximum disruption with minimal effort. They were essentially creating a blueprint for the collapse of human civilization. Perhaps the most unnerving aspect of the discovery was the revelation that this surveillance had been ongoing for decades. The AI uncovered historical data stretching back to the 1990s, including communication patterns, technological development timelines, and even evidence of systematic observation that predated the internet. We weren't discovering them. They had been watching us grow up. This realization sent shockwaves through the scientific and intelligence communities. The implications were staggering. We had been under constant surveillance by an unknown entity for decades, and they had been meticulously gathering data on every aspect of our civilization. But the method of observation was just as unsettling as the content of the reports. The 3i Atlas signal wasn't broadcasting aimlessly across the void. It was targeted, focused like a laser beam on a specific point in space. Every transmission cycle lasted precisely 6.2 hours, coinciding with the rotation period of 3i Atlas. This indicated that the object possessed a highly sophisticated directional antenna system, locked onto a specific target and reporting back with each rotation. Even more disturbing was the fact that every few hours, the transmission would cease for exactly 18 minutes. During these brief pauses, sensitive equipment detected faint signals emanating from deep space in return. This confirmed that 3i Atlas wasn't just sending reports. It was receiving instructions. Imagine the scene. Somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, something was reading detailed intelligence about Earth and sending back orders. Every pause in the signal was like waiting for a reply. A quiet question from the cosmos, answered by voices we couldn't hear. The implications were clear. We were not alone. And we were not in control. We had been observed, analyzed, and assessed by an intelligence far beyond our own. And the most terrifying question of all remained: what were they planning to do with the information they had gathered? The decoded signals from 3i Atlas ripped through the veil of our perceived cosmic solitude, plunging the world's powers into a vortex of covert action and existential dread. Publicly, a carefully crafted narrative of scientific anomaly and interesting space phenomena was fed to the media, a fragile dam holding back the tidal wave of panic that threatened to engulf civilization. Behind closed doors, however, the situation was far from calm. Emergency meetings, held in the deepest, most secure bunkers beneath national capitals, crackled with hushed urgency. Generals, intelligence chiefs, and scientific advisors, faces etched with grim determination, huddled around tables strewn with classified data printouts, the stark fluorescent lights reflecting in their worried eyes. The primary objective: damage control, containment, and, above all, understanding. The decoded transmissions painted a terrifying picture. Earth, under constant, meticulous surveillance for decades. Every communication, every military installation, every population center, catalogued and analyzed with unnerving precision. It was an intelligence breach of unimaginable scale, dwarfing any espionage scandal in human history. The initial reaction was, predictably, denial. Could this be some elaborate hoax? A sophisticated disinformation campaign orchestrated by a rival nation? But the sheer volume of data, the complexity of the encoding, and the alien nature of the technology quickly dispelled any lingering doubts. This was real, undeniably. terrifyingly real. Classified briefings were immediately disseminated to a select few within the upper echelons of government and military command. The language was clinical, detached, but the underlying message was impossible to ignore. We are not alone. We are being watched. And we are vulnerable. Gentlemen, ladies, a somber voice echoed in one such briefing. We are facing an adversary unlike any we have ever encountered. Their technological superiority is significant. Their knowledge of our infrastructure, our vulnerabilities, is comprehensive. We must proceed with the utmost caution, the utmost discretion. Planetary defense protocols, previously relegated to the realm of science fiction, were dusted off, updated, and quietly implemented. The Asteroid Redirect Mission, a long-dormant project designed to deflect potentially hazardous space rocks, was suddenly reactivated. Its funding mysteriously tripled overnight. The official justification? A renewed commitment to planetary safety. The real reason? To test our ability to manipulate objects in space. A crucial first step in any potential defense against an extraterrestrial threat. Cybersecurity teams worked around the clock, patching vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure, fortifying networks against potential attacks. The assumption was simple. If these beings had the capability to observe us so closely, they undoubtedly had the ability to disrupt us. But the threat wasn't just physical. The psychological impact of the discovery was equally concerning. Social scientists and psychologists were brought in to analyze potential public reactions, to develop strategies for managing widespread panic and societal breakdown. The fear was that the revelation of extraterrestrial surveillance could shatter humanity's collective psyche, leading to chaos and anarchy. The key, one psychologist advised, is to control the narrative, emphasize the potential for peaceful contact, the opportunity for scientific discovery, minimize the threat, the sense of vulnerability. We need to reassure the public that we are in control, that we are prepared. Easier said than done. How do you reassure a population that their every move has been monitored by an unknown alien intelligence? How do you maintain order when the foundations of human society, privacy, security, the illusion of control, have been irrevocably shaken? In the shadows, whispers of more radical measures began to circulate. Contingency plans were drawn up for mass evacuations, for the suppression of dissent, for the imposition of martial law. The very fabric of democracy was threatened, not by an external invasion, but by the fear of one. Meanwhile, the scientific community was racing against time to decipher the remaining signals, to understand the intentions of the observers. Every decoded packet of data was scrutinized, dissected, analyzed for clues. Were they preparing to attack, to intervene, or simply to observe? The answer remained elusive, shrouded in the alien complexity of the transmissions. But one thing was clear. Humanity was on the brink of a profound transformation. A shift in perspective that would forever alter our understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe. The weight of this knowledge pressed heavily on the shoulders of those few who were privy to the truth. World leaders, burdened with the responsibility of protecting their citizens from an unknown threat, struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy, to project an image of strength and resolve. We will not be intimidated, one world leader declared in a carefully crafted public statement. We will not succumb to fear. We will face this challenge with courage, with determination, and with unwavering faith in the resilience of the human spirit. But behind the brave words, a gnawing unease persisted. A sense of helplessness in the face of an intelligence that seemed to anticipate our every move. The feeling of being watched, scrutinized, judged. The realization that we were no longer masters of our own destiny. That our fate rested in the hands of beings beyond our comprehension. And as the final days of the observation period ticked away, the tension mounted, the dread deepened, and the world held its breath, bracing for an uncertain future in a universe that had suddenly become far more crowded, far more dangerous, and far more mysterious than anyone had ever imagined. 36 days. 36 days stood between humanity and a potential reckoning. The air crackled with an unspoken tension. A global anxiety palpable even through the cold, sterile interfaces of deep space monitoring stations. The final act was approaching. 3I. Atlas was nearing the end of its observation period, diligently compiling centuries, perhaps millennia, worth of data into a single, definitive report. A report that could, quite literally, seal our fate. Imagine being a cryptographer during this time. Every blip, every wave, every subtle shift in the signal was scrutinized under the most powerful analytical tools ever devised. Exhausted teams, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline, pored over the incoming data, desperately searching for clues, for any indication of what that final transmission might contain. Were they looking for signs of aggression, of pity, of indifference? The uncertainty was crippling. Unlike intercepting human communications, where context and cultural understanding offered a framework for interpretation, this was something entirely alien. We were attempting to decipher the intentions of a mind, or minds, operating on principles we could only begin to grasp. Imagine trying to understand the motivations of an ant colony, knowing that the ants held the power to dismantle your entire house. The problem wasn't just the complexity of the code, but the sheer volume of information. Every day, more data flooded in, adding layers of nuance to the already overwhelming picture. The AI continued to refine its analysis, identifying patterns within patterns, revealing a depth of understanding that was both awe-inspiring and utterly terrifying. They knew our history, our technology, our social structures. They understood our hopes, our fears, our very essence as a species. And as the observation period dwindled, the signals grew stronger, almost as if 3I, Atlas was ramping up its systems, preparing for a final, decisive burst of communication. These power surges were subtle but undeniable, spiking just enough to set off alarms in the deepest bunkers, to prompt whispered conversations in the highest echelons of power. The world held its breath, collectively bracing for impact. The potential outcomes were as varied as they were terrifying. Perhaps the report would conclude that humanity was a minor threat, a species not worth the effort of conquest or extermination. Maybe we'd be deemed a curiosity, a scientific anomaly worthy of continued observation. Or perhaps the assessment would be far more grim. A recommendation for intervention, a calculated strategy for subjugation, or even a plan for complete and utter annihilation? The possibility of annihilation was, of course, the most chilling. To think that an intelligence so far advanced could simply decide to erase us from existence, like wiping a stain from a cosmic tablecloth. It was a thought that kept world leaders awake at night, that haunted the dreams of scientists and soldiers alike. What defenses could we possibly mount against a civilization capable of traversing interstellar distances, of manipulating energy on scales we couldn't even imagine? The military scrambled to prepare for any contingency. Existing defense systems were upgraded. New weapons were developed in secret, and entire populations were drilled on emergency evacuation procedures. But deep down, everyone knew that these efforts were likely futile. We were building sandcastles against a tsunami, clinging to the illusion of control in the face of overwhelming power. But what if the report recommended something even more insidious than annihilation? What if it proposed subjugation? A slow, methodical erosion of our freedoms. A subtle manipulation of our societies until we were nothing more than puppets dancing on strings, held by alien hands? The thought was almost more terrifying than outright destruction. To lose our autonomy. To become slaves to an intelligence we could never hope to understand. It was a fate that many considered worse than death. As the final days approached, the pressure became unbearable. Conspiracy theories ran rampant, fueled by fear and speculation. Some claimed that governments were already in contact with the aliens, negotiating a secret surrender. Others believed that a massive disinformation campaign was underway, designed to keep the public in the dark until it was too late. The truth, of course, was far more complicated. Governments were desperately trying to understand the situation, to prepare for the unknown, to maintain order in the face of mounting anxiety. But they were also struggling with their own internal divisions, with conflicting agendas and competing priorities. The fate of humanity rested on the shoulders of fallible men and women, each grappling with their own fears and uncertainties. In the end, all we could do was wait. Wait for the final transmission. Wait for the inevitable judgment. Wait to learn whether our species would survive to see another sunrise. The universe held its breath, and humanity braced itself for whatever was to come. The clock was ticking, and the fate of the world hung in the balance. And the only thing we could be absolutely sure of was this: nothing would ever be the same again. The silence after that last transmission would be the loudest sound humanity ever heard.